Good evening, wherever you are listening from. Tonight, you get to rest while the past does the walking. Picture the Indus plain at dusk. Warm wind, reed-scented air, and a city of baked bricks sitting low and steady Mohenjo-daro, waiting like a cooled stone. You are heading for its bathhouse, where water once made a whole city feel human again. Fair warning, you probably won't survive this without your thoughts slowing down on purpose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You stand at the edge of a wide plain where the last light of the day stretches everything longer and kinder. The ground still holds heat in a thin shimmer, but the air is cooling, and it tastes faintly of reeds and mineral water. A soft wind crosses the landscape without urgency, as if it has never heard of deadlines. In the far distance, the river is only a suggestion, but you feel its presence in the cooler breath it sends inland, like a reminder that water is always nearby, always quietly in charge. Ahead, the city gathers itself in low, steady shapes. There is no dramatic skyline reaching for attention. Mohenjo-daro does not perform. It sits in the landscape like something designed to last. Layered brickwork, gentle rises of mounds, straight edges catching the sun's final glow. The beauty is practical, like a jar that does not leak, like a roof that keeps its promise. And your thoughts begin to thin out, as if the place is giving you permission to be simple. As you walk closer, the bricks become the main color of your world. They are the shade of toasted wheat in shadow, turning richer where the light touches them. Fine dust lifts under your steps and settles again, soft as flour, leaving a faint trace on your ankles. You think briefly about patient hands shaping clay and stacking it into something that outlasts a lifetime, and then you let the thought float away. This is not a night for accounting. This is a night for noticing. The air changes when the walls begin to influence it. Shade gathers in the narrow spaces, and you feel it on your skin like a cool cloth. Sound changes too. Out on the plain, wind is a wide thing. Here, between brick surfaces, it becomes quieter, as if the city knows how to hold itself together without noise. Somewhere a bird settles. Somewhere else, a small splash suggests water being handled with care. You step into the outskirts and feel the ground become firmer underfoot. The way forward is subtle, but it guides you with the certainty that comes from many people agreeing, day after day, on the best path. Openings in the brick suggest interior courtyards, private pockets of air where families work and rest beyond the public eye. Nothing begs to be admired. Everything simply functions, and the repeated competence becomes its own kind of comfort. People pass you in the dimming light. They do not treat you like a spectacle. Their glances are brief, light, the way you might glance at someone unfamiliar but harmless. A few slow their pace just enough to let you fall into the flow. Someone shifts aside and leaves you a clean line through the space. Hospitality here is practical, not ceremonial. Your attention keeps drifting upward, drawn toward a higher mound where the city's public heart seems to gather. You do not need a sign to feel where important spaces live. The gradual rise and the more deliberate alignments do the guiding for you, and you follow not because you must, but because the city makes it easy. As the path bends, you see the shape you came for. A broad, rectangular presence holds the eye even before it holds water. Brick steps descend into a recessed space, and the geometry is so balanced that your breath unconsciously adjusts to match it. The structure feels communal, built for shared maintenance rather than private luxury. Yet there is a hush around it, the hush that forms when many people agree, without needing to announce it, that something matters. You slow at the threshold. The bricks here are worn at the edges, softened by hands and time, but the lines remain true. You imagine water filling the hollow, reflecting torchlight or moonlight, carrying away dust and heat and the day's tightness. Your fatigue responds the way dry earth responds to the first careful pour. Not with excitement, with relief. Behind you, the sky completes its shift from gold to indigo. Ahead, the bathhouse waits, steady and unhurried. You take one more step closer, close enough to sense coolness lingering near the brick, and you feel the city offering you a new pace, slower, steadier, before you finally turn your attention to the streets that feed into this quiet heart. You let the bathhouse rest in the corner of your vision for a moment, like a promise you do not want to rush. Your feet turn instead toward the streets that feed it, because a place like this does not exist alone. It needs routes, habits, and the quiet agreement of thousands of ordinary days. The lanes accept you with a simple logic. Straight lines, right angles, and a feeling that the city has been drawn with a steady hand that does not tremble. The first thing you notice is how the ground seems to think ahead. Under the dust, there is intention. The street surface is firm, packed, and maintained, and it subtly tilts in ways your body senses before your mind names them. Water, when it comes, will not argue with this place. It will be guided. It will be told where to go, and it will go there. You move between brick walls that hold the day's warmth a little longer, releasing it slowly like a polite host offering you the last of the heat. Some buildings sit flush to the lane. Others open inward toward courtyards you cannot fully see. Private squares of air where a household's life happens in soft layers. You catch glimpses, hands rinsing something, fabric lifted and shaken, the pale shine of water in a basin catching the remaining light. Nothing is hurried. Everything looks practiced. Then you notice the covers. At first they seem like ordinary slabs placed along the edge of the road, as if someone has simply weighed down the city's borders. But as you walk, the pattern repeats. Long, flat stones or brick covers laid in a line, sometimes interrupted by a small opening, sometimes marked by a slightly different texture. Your eyes adjust, and suddenly the street becomes a diagram. Beneath those covers runs the city's second, quieter street. Its drainage, its hidden bloodstream. There is a particular kind of comfort in discovering that the city has a plan for your mess. Not a judgmental plan, not a dramatic plan, just a competent one. You think of your own world, how often it asks you to pretend you are not tired, not overloaded, not leaking stress from every seam. Mohenjo-daro does not ask you to pretend. It assumes you will spill. It builds for it. A faint dampness clings to the air near certain walls, and you realize some houses have small channels leading out from within, carrying used water from washing and bathing toward the covered drains. The water does not gush. It trickles. It behaves. It follows the slope with the same obedience your eyelids are starting to practice. You lean your attention closer, like a sleepy detective who still wants one more clue before bed. Along the drain line, you spot little access points, places where a cover can be lifted, where a blockage can be checked, where someone can keep the system honest. The city does not hide maintenance behind prestige. It admits that things must be cleaned, cleared, corrected. It builds the admission into the architecture. A soft scrape of footsteps approaches behind you. Someone passes, not impatiently, just efficiently, and their movement nudges your own rhythm into something steadier. You watch how they place their feet, avoiding a section where a cover sits slightly askew. The lesson arrives without ceremony. You adjust your step, and your body quietly thanks the stranger for saving you from an embarrassing tumble into ancient urban engineering. The lane opens into a wider street that feels like a main artery. Here, the grid becomes obvious. Long sight lines, cross streets that meet cleanly, corners that do not surprise you. Even in fading light, you can sense how the city organizes movement. People, goods, water, waste, all given separate chances to flow without colliding. It is an elegance made from restraint. Along the sides, you see raised thresholds and narrow doorways leading into homes. Some entrances sit a little higher than the street, and you understand why without being told. When rain comes, when wash water runs, a household does not want the street to come visiting. The city respects boundaries, even the watery kind. In places, small pits or jars seem positioned to catch heavier grit before it enters the drains. Simple traps that keep the covered channels from choking on the city's daily dust. A small breeze threads through, cooler now, carrying the faint mineral smell of water that has touched brick and clay. Somewhere nearby, a well mouth sits like a dark circle in the ground, ringed with brick. You do not need to look deep to feel it. Water is stored here in the city's belly, drawn up by effort, spent with care, then guided away with equal care. The cycle is quiet, but it is everywhere, humming beneath your steps. You follow the slope without thinking about it. The streets guide you towards slightly higher ground, then ease you back down, steering you like a gentle hand at your shoulder. And because you are human, your mind wanders into a half-sarcastic admiration. This city, built long before your alarms and inboxes, has a better relationship with hygiene than most people you have met on public transport. The thought makes you exhale, a small laugh without sound, and it loosens something in your chest. As you continue, the presence of the bathhouse begins to pull on you again, not as a destination, but as a center. The drains seem to angle in its direction. The flow of people subtly bends that way too, like everyone is orbiting a shared understanding. Water is not only for survival, it is for becoming yourself again after the day has coated you in grit. The light sinks lower. The bricks deepen in color. The covered drains run on, steady and hidden, doing their work without needing applause. You keep walking, feeling the city's order settle over you like a blanket, firm, clean-edged, reassuring, until the bathhouse is no longer just a shape ahead, but the natural next step in a system that has been guiding you all along. You drift back toward that rectangular hush, letting the street's covered drains fade behind you like a thought you have already decided not to chase. The bathhouse sits slightly higher than the lanes, not towering, just certain. Brick upon brick arranged with the calm authority of a place built for ordinary bodies. The air cools a little as you approach, and the sound thins out, as if the city is lowering its voice for something that deserves quiet. From a short distance, the great bath does not announce itself with decoration. It is not trying to impress the sunset. It is simply there. A sunken rectangle held by thick walls, framed by a broad walkway that keeps movement smooth and feet steady. The geometry is plain in a way that feels considerate. It asks your mind to stop hunting for meaning in flourishes and just accept function, proportion, and balance. Your shoulders loosen in response. You come to the edge and stop. The threshold is wide enough for passing bodies, for someone carrying water, for someone pausing without creating a traffic problem. The bricks beneath your feet are slightly polished by use, their edges softened by countless sols and the repeated rhythm of communal routine. Fine dust rests in the seams, but here it feels less like dirt and more like a soft powder that time leaves behind when it has nothing else to do. You let your gaze drop into the basin. Steps descend along one side in a clean, patient line, each tread broad and shallow, built to accept a tired body without demanding courage. You can almost feel the sequence in your legs. A foot testing the first step, weight shifting downward, skin meeting cooler air near the waterline. There is no need for dramatic plunging. This place is designed for gradual surrender. Even in the dim light, the seams catch your attention. Along the inside walls and near the step edges, certain joints hold a darker sheen. Bitumen, a natural tar pressed into the brickwork to keep water where it belongs. It glints faintly, not pretty in a decorative way, but satisfying in the way a sealed jar is satisfying when you are carrying something precious. The smell is subtle and earthy, warmed by the day and released now into evening, resinous and mineral at once. Your mind, which loves measurements when it is trying to avoid feelings, tries to size the space. The pool is generous but not endless, about the length of a small home, wide enough for several people to move without tangling limbs, deep enough to feel like true immersion rather than a polite splash. Because the edges are straight, the size is easy to grasp. There are no confusing curves, no theatrical angles. The bath offers clarity, and clarity at night can feel like mercy. Around the basin, the surrounding structure forms a protective ring. Doorways and raised platforms suggest adjacent rooms, places for preparing, for leaving belongings, for moving in and out without colliding. The architecture implies that bathing here is not a private indulgence. It is coordinated, respected, given room to happen with dignity. You picture wet footprints stopping at the edge, small bundles set down, hands smoothing cloth, bodies easing into water as if returning the day to the pool and carrying nothing back out but a calmer skin. You notice practical kindness everywhere. The walkway keeps enough distance from the water's edge that dripping feet do not turn the place into chaos. The corners are reinforced. The walls are thick, Water is heavy. It presses outward, searching for weakness. Yet the basin looks as if it has been taught how to resist leaking through preparation rather than force. It is a quiet lesson in systems. If you want peace, you build for the messy parts, and you do it before the mess arrives. The water below reflects what remains of the sky. It is darker now, a soft indigo, and the surface holds a faint tremble. Perhaps from a breeze, perhaps from someone stirring the pool. The ripples widen, thin, and disappear. You find yourself watching them the way you might watch your breathing when you are trying to fall asleep, grateful that something can move and settle without being chased. If you are honest, a small part of you expected ornament, carvings, statues, some grand declaration of importance. Instead, you get brick, proportion, and a refusal to perform. The sarcastic corner of your mind tries to joke about ancient minimalism, then gives up because the simplicity feels deliberate and kind. This bathhouse does not need to persuade anyone of its worth. The city has already agreed. Bodies need washing, heat needs releasing, minds need a place to stop clenching. Movement returns at the edge of your vision. People circulating along the walkway, slow and practiced, carrying small bundles, moving with the ease of those who already know the space. No one stares at you like a problem to solve. You are simply another body that has arrived with dust on its skin and thoughts in its pockets, and the bathhouse absorbs your awkwardness the way it absorbs heat. Patiently, without comment. You remain at the threshold a few breaths longer, letting your eyes travel the rectangle again. Not because you miss something, but because repetition itself is calming. You take in the bitumen dark seams, the thick walls, the steps descending into coolness. The place invites you to slow down, to let your thoughts settle like silt in a jar until the water above them turns clear. And with your weight shifting almost without instruction, you let the first step pull you closer to the quiet waiting below. You pause on the first step, not because you fear the water, but because you suddenly respect the work it took to make water wait here for you, calm and ready. The bathhouse looks effortless from a distance, brick, geometry, a hush, but water is never effortless. Water always has a story of being found, lifted, carried, stored, and protected from dust and heat. If you listen closely, you can almost hear that story under the quiet, like a second heartbeat in the walls. So you ease back up and out again, circling the basin rather than entering it. The walkway guides you toward the practical side of the place, where the air feels cooler and slightly damp, and where people move with the steady purpose of those who have handled water all their lives. Someone passes with a rounded jar hugged to the hip, the clay belly mottled with faint water marks. Another carries a smaller pot, the mouth covered with cloth tied tight against drifting grit. Their movements are ordinary, but the steadiness feels like a kind of wealth. You follow that flow and find a well, simple, circular, and lined with brick so neat it looks almost modern in its stubbornness. The rim is smoothed by touch. Around it, the bricks darken where splashes have landed and dried, day after day. You lean in just enough to feel the cool breath rising from the shaft. Down below, the water catches a thin slice of the dimming sky and sends it trembling back up at you. A rope slides through practiced hands. The fibers look rough, worn in the way reliable things get worn. A clay pot descends into the darkness, disappears, then returns heavier, droplets tapping back into the well like tiny punctuation. No one rushes the lift. The pull is steady, efficient, mindful of skin and shoulders. Watching it, your own breathing starts to match the rhythm, as if your body wants to learn the city's pace. The more you notice, the clearer the system becomes. Wells do not feel like rare monuments. They feel like everyday access points. You sense more of them nearby, some along streets, some tucked into courtyards, some placed where many households can share the draw without turning it into conflict. The abundance is not limitless water. It is dependable access, and in a hot, dusty place that is a quiet kind of prosperity. From the well, water becomes a journey through containers shaped by experience. Clay stays cooler than metal in the sun. Narrow mouths keep out grit and insects. Rounded bodies sit against the hip or balance on the head with surprising grace, helped by a padded cloth ring that saves bone from bruising. You watch a carrier adjust that cloth with a quick twist, and you think about how much invention lives in small comforts that never get named in history lessons. Not far from the well, large storage jars sit in clusters, grounded and wide-bellied, their mouths covered. Some are placed in shade near walls that hold coolness longer. Others are partly sunk into the earth, using soil as a slow refrigerator. Water, once lifted, is treated like something worth defending from sun and dust, not because anyone is dramatic about it, but because experience has already taught the lesson. You also notice what the city does with water after it has done its job. Near washing spots, small channels lead away from basins toward covered drains, while fresh water stays close to wells and storage. Clean water is invited in. Used water is escorted out. The city does this without fuss, the way a tired person tidies their room not for guests, but for peace. Now, when you glance back toward the Great Bath, you understand it differently. The basin is not filled by a single heroic bucket. It asks for coordination. Repeated draws, repeated carrying, repeated pouring, 1,000 small efforts that add up to a surface that can reflect the moon. You can picture the routine without needing a schedule. Early, before the heat bites, water is hauled. Later, when the sun is sharp, the filled basin becomes a refuge. Near the bathhouse, you spot a low area where the brickwork suggests a settling point, a place that lets heavier grit drop out before water moves on. It matches what you saw in the streets. The city expects silt. It designs for the fact that life leaves residue, and then it calmly gives that residue somewhere to go. The calm you feel here is not only aesthetic. It is structural. You return to the steps of the Great Bath and look again at the water's surface. It no longer feels like a simple pool. It feels earned. Each ripple becomes the end of a long chain. Brick-lined wells, rope and pot, steady shoulders, shaded jars, careful separation, covered drains. The bathhouse is not a miracle. It is many ordinary choices made well, repeated until they become tradition. Your fingers brush the brick at the edge, cool now, slightly rough, grounding you. Somewhere nearby, someone rinses a basin. Someone tightens a jar covering. Someone carries water with the same unhurried competence you have been borrowing all evening, and your body begins to want the next softness. The small rituals that prepare skin and mind to enter water with respect, not haste, as if you are about to step into a calm that has been patiently built for you. You do not go straight down the steps yet. Your body wants to, but the city has been teaching you all evening that good things here happen in sequence, not in a rush. Water may be the centerpiece, but preparation is the frame that keeps it from feeling like chaos. So you follow the subtle current of movement along the bathhouse edge, toward the spaces that sit beside the basin like calm side rooms in a steady mind. The air changes again as you pass through a narrow opening. It becomes warmer, closer, softened by brick walls that hold onto the day's last heat. The light is lower here, more private, and the sound of the city feels farther away, as if someone has gently closed a door on the outside world. You can smell clay, dust, and the faint, nutty trace of oil that has been warmed by skin and time. A low platform runs along one wall, its surface worn smooth. Nearby, shallow bowls and small jars sit in a tidy cluster, not displayed like luxury, but placed like tools that belong where they are used. Some containers are terracotta, some darker and heavier, their mouths covered with cloth or lids to keep out drifting grit. You recognize the same careful habit you saw at the wells. What matters is kept clean by simple, repeated attention. You move as the locals move, quietly, with the unspoken assumption that bodies deserve privacy without anyone having to make a speech about it. There is an ease to the way they give one another space. No one crowds. No one performs embarrassment. The bathhouse is communal, yes, but the culture of it is modest in a practical way. Like a city that has decided long ago that dignity is more efficient than awkwardness. You set your small bundle down where others have set theirs, and you feel the faint relief of letting weight leave your hands. The dust that has gathered on your skin all day seems suddenly obvious, like you only notice how tired you are once you stop moving. Your shoulders drop another fraction. Your jaw unclenches. You realize with a sleepy kind of amusement that you have been carrying tension the way some people carry water, carefully, constantly, as if spilling would be a disaster. Here, spilling is expected. That might be the entire philosophy. A small bowl is offered into the flow of hands and ends up near you, along with a smear of oil in a shallow dish. The oil is simple, plant-based, lightly scented, not trying to seduce anyone into buying a subscription. It smells faintly of seeds and warmth, with an herbal edge that feels more medicinal than decorative. You touch it with your fingertips, and it spreads thinly and smoothly, catching the last light like a quiet sheen. You begin at your forearms, rubbing the oil in slow circles. The motion is unhurried, as if time itself has been told to sit down. The oil softens the dust on your skin, turning it from dry grit into something you can actually remove without scraping yourself raw. You work along your wrists, up toward your elbows, then across your shoulders where the day has sat the heaviest. The brick-warmed air keeps the oil fluid, and your skin responds almost immediately, less tight, less thirsty. Nearby, you notice a small tool moving in practiced hands. A smooth-edged scraper of some kind, stone, shell, or well-shaped ceramic, used not to hurt, but to lift away the mixture of oil, sweat, and dust. It is not dramatic. It is not violent. It is simply efficient, like the covered drains outside. An elegant plan for what the body naturally accumulates. When your turn arrives in the quiet rhythm, You take a similar piece and test it gently along your forearm. The edge glides, and a thin roll of softened grime gathers and lifts away. It is oddly satisfying in the way clearing a clogged channel is satisfying. Proof that the system works when you cooperate with it. You move slowly, letting the tool do the work rather than forcing it. Each pass leaves your skin a little cleaner, a little lighter, as if you are removing not just dust but the whole day's insistence that you stay braced. You switch to your calves and ankles, where fine powder has settled into every crease. The scraper catches it easily now that oil has done its quiet magic. You wipe the tool on a cloth, then continue. It is the same logic you saw in the city's design. Loosen what clings, guide it away, keep the pathway clear. You think of the bitumen seams in the bath, how they hold water in place by sealing the edges. Here, you are sealing your own edges in a different way, keeping yourself intact by caring for the boundary between you and the world. Around you, there are other preparations. Someone rinses a small cloth, squeezing water back into a basin. Someone rubs ash or fine clay between their palms as a cleanser. Someone combs dust from hair with patient fingers. Nothing is extravagant. Everything is purposeful. Cleanliness here is not a performance for strangers. It is maintenance. It is respect for the body that must wake up tomorrow and do life again. You become more aware of the bathhouse's choreography. The side rooms keep the pool from becoming a chaotic spectacle. The walkway outside gives space for waiting feet. The steps offer a gradual entry. Even the air seems designed warm here, cooler near the water, so your skin does not shock when you descend. It is comfort made from planning, and you feel gratitude bloom in a soft, quiet way that does not need words. When you have finished oiling and scraping, you rinse with a small pour of water. It runs down your arms in narrow streams, carrying away the last of the loosened dust. Droplets fall into the basin with gentle taps, the smallest sounds in the world, yet somehow enough to make your mind go quieter. You dry lightly, not fully, just enough that you are not dripping into the next space like an uncontrolled weather event. You gather yourself again, lighter now, as if someone has peeled a thin, tired layer off your skin. The private warmth of the side room releases you back toward the open air of the bathhouse edge. Ahead, the great bath waits with its calm rectangle and its patient steps, the water surface holding the darkening sky like a promise kept. And with your body prepared, softened, cleansed, steadied, you begin to move toward the descent, ready to let the city's water do the rest. Your feet find the first step again, and this time you do not retreat into observation. The oil has softened your skin, the scraping has lifted away the day's crust, and the rinse has left you clean enough to feel the night air like a fabric against your arms. The bathhouse seems to notice, in its silent way, and offers you the descent without resistance. You place your weight carefully, feeling the brick under your soles. Cooler than the side room, slightly damp near the edge, textured just enough to keep you from slipping into an unplanned historical reenactment. The steps are broad, forgiving. They do not ask you to be brave. They only ask you to be present. As you move down, the air shifts. Above the basin, the night is open and dry. Closer to the water, it becomes denser, carrying a faint mineral smell and the soft, tar-dark note of sealed seams. Bitumen, warmed earlier by sunlight, now holds a quieter scent. Earthy, resinous, like something ancient that has decided to be useful. The walls around you trap and return sound, and the smallest noises. Your breathing, the whisper of water against brick, gain a gentle echo that makes everything feel slower, as if time itself is padded. You reach the level where the water's coolness reaches your shins without touching you yet. It is the kind of cool that makes your skin pay attention. A small ripple crosses the surface, and the reflected sky trembles. Indigo broken into soft lines, then settles back into a smooth sheet. The water is not flashy. It does not sparkle like a staged luxury pool. It looks like work that has been done well, then allowed to rest. You lower 1 foot into it. The first touch is honest. Cool, yes, but not punishing. It wraps your toes and the ball of your foot with a firmness that feels like being held rather than shocked. You pause just long enough to let your body recalibrate, because your nervous system, poor thing, has been trained to treat any unexpected sensation as a potential crisis. Here, the water teaches it a different reflex. Soften, accept, breathe. You step down another tread, and the water climbs to your ankles, then your calves. The brick steps disappear under a thin veil of ripples that slide around your legs like silk. The bathhouse carries the sound upward. A low, gentle lap, repeated and reassuring. You can feel the temperature difference smoothing out. Skin cooling, muscles unclenching. The last heat of the day leaving you in quiet, invisible streams. The water reaches your knees, and the sensation becomes almost ceremonial, not because anyone is declaring it so, but because your body recognizes the threshold. This is the point where standing in air becomes standing in a different world. You think of the city's drains and channels, how water is guided and respected. Now you are the thing being guided. Your balance adjusts. Your posture changes. You become slower because the water makes speed feel unnecessary. As you descend further, you sense other bodies in the pool. Not crowded, not chaotic, simply present. Movement is careful and considerate. A shoulder turns to make space. A pair of hands rinses water over forearms in a repetitive motion that looks like a prayer without religion. No one splashes wildly. No one tries to dominate the surface with noise. The bathhouse has trained everyone, gently over time, that calm is the default. You take another step and let the water rise to your thighs. Presses lightly against you, a steady pressure that feels grounding rather than restrictive. Your skin, newly cleaned, seems more sensitive to the water's texture. You can feel minute currents created by your own movement, ripples that travel outward, touch the brick wall, and return softened. The pool answers you, but it answers quietly. The echo in the space continues to cradle sound. It is not the sharp echo of an empty stone hall. It is dampened, rounded by humidity and by bodies and by water. Each breath you take feels amplified in your chest, slower and deeper. Your mind, so used to sprinting, finds fewer sharp corners to run into here. The geometry of the basin is too simple for mental drama. Straight lines, true angles, a rectangle that holds you the way a steady thought holds you when everything else is noisy. You reach the final step and let yourself stand where the water meets your waist. The cool spreads inward, not just on the surface, but into muscle. The oil that remained on your skin now feels like a thin barrier that keeps the water from being harsh. It turns the sensation into a smooth glide rather than a bite. You roll your shoulders once, and the water slips over your collarbones in a soft wave, carrying away the last invisible residue of the day. Sweat, dust, tension, the stale taste of worry. You lean slightly back and let the water support you. The buoyancy is subtle but real. A fraction of your weight disappears, and your body takes the hint. You do not have to hold everything up by yourself. Not tonight. Not in this basin that has been waiting, filled by steady hands, sealed by careful seams, maintained by a city that understands the value of not being grimy and exhausted all the time. Above, the sky deepens. The last of the daylight is gone now, and what remains is moonlit softness, a pale glow that lands on the water and makes it look almost metallic. The surface holds that light in broken reflections, always moving, always returning to stillness. You notice how the walls catch the moon's glow too, each brick edge faintly outlined, as if the bathhouse is being redrawn in silver. You move forward, away from the steps, letting the water reach higher as you ease into a deeper section. It rises to your chest, and your breath adjusts again. Shorter for a moment, then longer, then calm. The water feels cooler here, away from the warmed brick edges, and you welcome it the way you welcome a clean sheet after a long day. The city seems to exhale with you. Around you, the gentle, repetitive motions continue. Rinsing, resting, floating still as if the body has finally remembered how to be quiet. A small ripple brushes your cheek as you lower yourself slightly, letting water touch your neck. You do not plunge. You sink with the same patience the city has taught you from the streets onward. And in that slow surrender, the great bath becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a spectacle, not a luxury, but a shared pause in the middle of human life, where even your thoughts learn to soften and drift. You remain in the water long enough for your body to forget what urgency feels like. The cool settles into you. Your muscles stop resisting the day. Even your face changes, less tightened, less braced. Though you only realize it when the surface of the pool offers you a faint, wavering reflection, and you barely recognize the calmer version of yourself. And then you notice the hosts, not official guards, not ceremonial attendants, not anyone with a badge that says please respect history, just locals who move through the bathhouse with an ease that tells you they belong here the way birds belong to the sky. They are the ones who know the rhythms, when to enter, where to stand, how to share a narrow space without turning it into friction. They do not speak to you. They do not need to. They guide with motion, with pauses, with the subtle angle of a shoulder that indicates a path. One passes near you, then slows slightly at the edge of your awareness, creating a gentle opening for you to follow. It is a wordless invitation, the kind that lets you keep your dignity because no one is forcing you to accept help. You drift after them, letting the water carry you in small, controlled steps. The bathhouse floor is steady underfoot, but the water makes every movement slightly deliberate, like walking through a dream where you cannot rush even if you try. They lead you toward the side of the basin where the wall is close enough to rest against. You watch them place a hand on the brick, not gripping, just touching, and you do the same. The brick feels cooler below the waterline, slicker with algae or mineral softness, and the simple contact grounds you, the way touching a table grounds you when you feel dizzy. Your body understands the language. Here is a stable point. Here is where you can pause. The host shifts their posture, not blocking anyone, not claiming space, simply existing in a way that reduces chaos around them. You notice how others respond without thinking. They give room, they angle their bodies away to avoid bumping, they slow their steps near the wall. The bathhouse is full of tiny negotiations, and these experienced bathers model how to negotiate without ego. You follow them out of the water after a while, not because you are cold, but because the ritual seems to include cycles. Soak, pause, rinse, return. Your host steps toward the stairs, and you let your feet find the steps behind them. As you rise, the air hits your wet skin and cools you instantly. It could feel harsh, but the evening warmth still clings to the bricks, and the bathhouse structure reduces wind's bite. The transition is thoughtful. The city has planned even for your goosebumps. On the walkway, you watch your host adjust a cloth and lightly wipe their arms, not drying fully, just removing excess water so it does not drip everywhere. You imitate the motion, and the small act feels like learning a cultural rule that makes the whole space nicer. Another bather passes and does not have to step around puddles. Another person's bundle stays dry. The bathhouse remains calm because everyone contributes to calm without needing applause. The host moves toward a shallow basin nearby, lower than the great bath, fed by fresh water, meant for rinsing rather than soaking. They scoop water with a small vessel and pour it over their forearms, then their shoulders, washing away anything the pool has left behind. It is not an anxious cleansing, not a fear of contamination. It is simply completeness, a finishing stroke, like closing a book properly instead of leaving it face down. You do the same. Water streams down your arms, catching moonlight in thin, silver lines before falling into the basin. Feels cooler than the great bath, fresh and bright on your skin. The sensation wakes you just enough to appreciate how well the city understands balance. A soak to soften, a rinse to clarify, then rest again. Your host steps aside near the wall and pauses. The pause tells you something. This is a waiting point. Others flow around without colliding because this person has chosen a spot that does not interrupt the path. You choose a similar spot, and the bathhouse feels instantly easier, as if you have been promoted from confused visitor to useful participant. From here, you watch the bathhouse as a living system. People enter and exit in slow cycles, never all at once. Some remain in the water, nearly motionless, letting the pool's pressure quiet their joints. Others sit at the edge with feet in, letting their bodies cool gradually. Some rinse, scrape lightly at skin, then return. It is all rhythm, not rules shouted across a room. You begin to sense, too, that the hosts are doing more than guiding etiquette. They are watching the space the way someone watches a fire. Not with fear, but with awareness. They note water level, how quickly fresh water is being added, whether any debris has drifted in, whether the steps are slick. Maintenance is part of belonging. It is not glamorous, but it is the reason the bathhouse remains a refuge instead of becoming a mess. Your host's attention shifts toward a corner of the basin where the wall meets the floor. A faint darker patch is visible under the water, not alarming, just different. Maybe silt, maybe a slight change in the seal's surface. The host does not panic. They simply watch, then move quietly along the edge to get a better angle. Their calm travels into you. You look too, not with dread, but with the steady curiosity the city has been training into you since you first noticed the covered drains. You return to the water after a short pause, following your host's path along the side where movement is easiest. You slip in gently, letting the water close around you again. The temperature now feels even more perfect, your body already acclimated. You lean near the wall, giving space to others, and you realize you are no longer merely visiting Mohenjo-daro. You are participating in its calm agreement. Keep the flow smooth, keep the water clean, keep the shared space gentle. The host drifts away eventually, leaving you with the knowledge they have given without words. Where to stand, how to move, how to pause. It is a kind of guidance that feels deeply human, competence offered quietly, dignity preserved. And as the moon climbs a little higher, you float in the great bath with that guidance settling into you like warm tea, even though the water is cool. You do not stay in the water forever, even though your body briefly tries to negotiate that possibility. Eventually, cool becomes enough, and enough becomes the gentle nudge towards something else. The next part of cleanliness that does not happen in the pool, but around it, cloth, towels, wraps, the quiet fabric world that carries a city's dignity from one hour to the next. You rise along the steps again, water sliding off you in slow sheets, and you remember the small lesson from the walkway. Drip less, disturb less, keep the shared space calm. You wipe your arms lightly, not chasing dryness, just preventing the bathhouse from turning into a wet accident waiting to happen. The moonlight makes every droplet look like it is trying to become jewelry, but you let it fall where it should, into basins, onto bricks meant to handle water, never onto someone else's path. The flow of bodies leads you outward, away from the basin's echo and into the open air where the city breathes more widely. The bathhouse remains behind you as a quiet rectangle of dark water, but you can still feel its influence in your posture. Slower, steadier, less defensive. Your skin is cool and clean, your mind reduced to a few simple sensations. Brick underfoot, night air on wet hair, the faint mineral scent that clings like a memory. Nearby, you find the washing area, not as a separate building with a dramatic label, but as a natural extension of the bathhouse's logic. Low platforms and flat stones sit in the right places, worn smooth by repetition. A shallow channel runs along the edge, guiding used water away with the same calm competence you saw under the streets. There are basins and jars, cloths and bundles, all arranged with the quiet clarity of tools that belong to a practiced routine. You watch hands at work. A garment is lifted, soaked, pressed against stone, then moved rhythmically in short strokes. Rub, rinse, fold, rub again. The sound is soft. Fabric whispering against stone, water shifting in a shallow basin, the occasional squeeze that sends a small stream back into the channel. No one performs effort with theatrics. No one rushes as if a stopwatch is about to scream. Laundry here is not punishment. It is maintenance, treated with the same respect as the drains and the sealed seams of the bath. You step closer, careful not to interrupt anyone's rhythm. The stone surfaces catch moonlight in dull, pale patches. Some are slightly slanted to encourage runoff. Some are rougher in one area where friction matters, smoother in another where cloth needs gentler handling. You notice the quiet intelligence embedded in these details, the way the city seems to anticipate the needs of hands that are tired, backs that should not bend too much, water that should not pool where it becomes stagnant. A cloth is wrung nearby, twisted with practiced precision. The motion is slow enough to be kind to the fabric, firm enough to be effective. Water streams out in neat lines, then breaks into droplets, tapping into the basin with a steady, sleepy percussion. You realize how many small sounds belong to cleanliness, and how soothing they are when no one is rushing them. The drip, the squeeze, the soft slap of cloth folded against itself. You find a piece of fabric that has been rinsed and set aside. Something simple, perhaps a wrap or towel, and you use it to pat your own skin a little drier. The fabric smells faintly of sun and clay, as if it has absorbed the city's whole atmosphere. The sensation is grounding. It makes you aware of your body as something real and present, not just a vehicle for worry. Then your attention lifts upward, following the path of clean cloth. Rooftops, courtyards, lines of fabric laid out to meet the night breeze, and earlier, the day's sun. You walk toward a cluster of buildings where the roofs are reachable by modest stairways and low ladders, and you sense that you are being guided again, not by words, but by the way people naturally move. Someone carries a bundle upward. Another returns down with empty arms and a lighter step. You follow because the city's rhythm is persuasive in the gentlest way. Up on the roof, the world opens. The air is cooler, freer, moving across the flat surfaces without obstruction. From here you can see the city's grid as a soft geometry in moonlight, straight lanes, rectangular courtyards, brick edges made silver by the night. And across this rooftop landscape, cloth lies like calm flags. Tunics, wraps, small squares, larger sheets, all arranged to dry with maximum airflow and minimum drama. You pause at the edge of a rooftop and watch how fabric is treated when it is clean. It is handled with care, shaken lightly to release folds, smoothed with palms so it dries evenly, placed where dust is less likely to drift. Heavier pieces are weighted at corners with small stones or folded over parapet edges. Lighter pieces are spread flat in areas where the wind is gentler. Every choice suggests the same philosophy you have seen everywhere tonight. Do the practical thing quietly, and your life gets softer. The night breeze slides over the cloth and then over your skin, and you feel how drying becomes part of rest. Clean fabric is not only about appearance. It is about comfort. It is about sleeping without grit scratching you awake. It is about wrapping a child in something that does not itch. It is about showing up to the day with a body that feels cared for. Clean cloth is not vanity here. It is kindness that you can touch. From the rooftop, you see other rooftops doing the same. Small patches of fabric catching moonlight, turning faintly luminous. The sight is strangely tender. A city that invests energy in drying cloth properly is a city that believes tomorrow is worth preparing for. It assumes people will wake and live again. It assumes the routine will continue. It assumes dignity is not a luxury. You walk along the roof edge, careful with your footing, and glance down into courtyards where basins sit near wells and drains. You can trace the loop now, water drawn up, used to wash bodies and cloth, then guided away. The system repeats, not as a prison, but as a rhythm that keeps life from collapsing into grime and exhaustion. You think again, quietly, almost fondly, of those covered drains beneath the streets. They are not glamorous, but they make everything else possible. Clean water and clean cloth and calm sleep all depend on the city's willingness to handle the unglamorous parts with competence. A piece of fabric flutters near you, lifting slightly in the breeze, then settling again. The movement feels like a slow exhale. You realize your own breathing has become similar, steady, deep, unforced. Your thoughts are still there, of course, but they have softened at the edges, like cloth that has been washed too many times to stay stiff. You remain on the rooftop a while, letting the night air finish drying your skin, letting the moonlight make the brickwork feel gentle instead of hard. Below, the bathhouse continues its quiet cycles. Around you, cloth dries with patient obedience, and you understand, in a simple and sleepy way, that cleanliness here is not a single act. It is a culture of small care, repeated until it becomes the city's natural state. When you finally drift back down from the rooftops, the city feels different under your feet. Not because the bricks have changed, but because you have. Clean skin makes the night air feel sharper. Dried cloth makes your movements quieter. A mind that has soaked in water and watched laundry dry under moonlight suddenly has less appetite for chaos. You step back into the lanes with a steadier pace, and the city's order meets you halfway. The flow from the bathhouse does not lead to silence. It leads to life, soft, late evening life. The streets are not crowded, but they are awake. Somewhere nearby, a lamp glows behind a doorway, spilling a thin ribbon of light onto brick. The air holds faint scents that were not as obvious near the water. Grain, smoke from cooking fires, the earthy sweetness of stored produce. Cleanliness, you realize, is not an ending here. It is a reset that sends you back into the city ready to be human again. You follow the subtle movement of people toward a broader street, where the ground feels more worn from regular traffic. This is the market artery, less of a single bazaar and more of a network of spaces where exchange happens naturally. Even at night, trade does not vanish. It simply becomes quieter, more intimate, the way a household becomes quieter when the day's work is done. You pass low platforms and open-fronted rooms where goods are stored and sorted. The shapes of containers stand out. Jars, baskets, woven trays, everything designed to hold and measure. In the dim light, you see small piles of grain, dark lumps of resin, shells, and what looks like bead blanks waiting to become something more. There is no cluttered sprawl. Items sit in deliberate groupings, as if the market is another kind of system, like the drains, like the bathhouse, built to keep life flowing without unnecessary friction. As you walk, you notice the small discipline of measurement. A stone weight sits near a platform. Another weight, similar in shape, rests beside it. Someone's hand moves a measure, scooping, leveling, pouring with calm consistency. You do not need to hear words to recognize the agreement behind the gesture. Fairness matters. Predictability matters. If a city can agree on how to move water, it can also agree on how to move value. You pause near a vendor space where a balance tool is set up, simple, steady, with two sides meant to match. The scale is not ornate, but it stands with an almost ceremonial dignity. You watch a portion being measured, adjusted with small additions and subtractions until it sits right. There is a satisfaction in that moment, like watching a picture frame be leveled until it stops tilting. Your mind likes it. Your nervous system likes it. Your tiredness likes anything that says, "Here, things are made even." You move along, letting the market sense drift around you. Grain and legumes, perhaps, dried fish from the river, herbs, smoke from fires where evening meals are finishing. Nothing overwhelms. The air is balanced like the city itself. People carry small bundles, set them down, pick them up again. A basket passes close, woven tight, its pattern repeating in a hypnotic rhythm that makes you feel drowsier rather than alert. Because you are human, and because you cannot help it, your mind supplies a small sarcastic thought. It is remarkable how a city this old understands logistics better than some modern delivery apps. The thought does not become loud. It just drifts through, amused, then fades as you watch another smooth exchange happen without conflict. You notice how bodies move in the market street. They do not collide. They angle around one another with practiced awareness, much like in the bathhouse. Space is shared. Paths are respected. Even the way someone sets down a jar seems considerate, placed close to the wall, not in the middle of movement. The same cultural muscle that keeps the great bath calm also keeps the market calm. The city carries its values through everything. Water, cloth, trade. The simple act of not making your neighbor's life harder. You find yourself drawn to a section where the goods are smaller and more precise. Beads, shells, tiny pieces of stone, perhaps copper fragments. The moonlight catches a few polished surfaces and makes them flash briefly, like small stars fallen into someone's hands. Here, the market feels almost like a workshop spillover. Tools laid out, materials sorted, the quiet promise of craft. But you do not linger too long. Tonight is not about consuming. It is about witnessing. You continue down the street and notice the architecture supporting exchange. Raised thresholds, shaded niches, small storage spaces built into walls. The city's bricks do not only hold water systems, they hold economic systems too. Places to keep goods clean and dry, spaces to count and measure without dust blowing everything into confusion. At a corner, you see a cluster of vessels arranged by size. It reminds you of the bathhouse jars, water carried carefully, stored carefully. Here, the same jars hold grain or oil or other commodities. The connection clicks. The city's obsession with containers is not aesthetic. It is survival and order. A good jar is a quiet hero. Keeps water drinkable, grain edible, oil usable. Prevents waste. Prevents panic. In a world where resources are precious, containment is peace. You drift past a small area where people sit low, sorting something by hand. Fingers move steadily, separating, selecting, discarding what is unusable. The gesture is familiar now. The same careful scraping of skin, the same wringing of cloth, the same clearing of silt from channels. Sorting is another kind of cleaning. The city cleans water, cleans bodies, cleans cloth, cleans trade, cleans life. The market street begins to thin as you move away from its center. The scents soften. The lamps become fewer. The city's hum remains, but quieter, like a song turning into a lullaby. You realize you have been guided again, not by words, but by the city's gentle structure, from bathhouse to rooftop to market, from personal care to communal exchange, all linked by the same steady logic. And as you turn your steps back toward the bathhouse area, you feel the night settling deeper. Your body carries the calm of water and the rhythm of measured trade. You are not just clean. You are aligned like a balanced scale, like a drain cleared of blockage, like cloth laid flat to dry evenly. The city has done what it quietly does best. It has made your inner world a little more orderly, without asking you to perform anything in return. You do not leave the market entirely. The wider street softens behind you, but a narrower lane branches off like a quieter thought, and the scent of grain and cooking smoke gives way to sharper notes. Stone dust, warmed shell, a faint metallic tang. Lamps sit low and steady, and under their light hands are still awake, still making. Here, value is not only exchanged, it is grown. On a low platform, tiny materials lie sorted with calm confidence. Pale shell fragments rest beside glossy black stone. Milky chalcedony catches the light like cooled moon. And there is carnelian, deep orange and ember bright, as if sunset decided to become something you can hold. Nothing is piled carelessly. Everything is arranged by hardness and shape, by what the hands already know they can persuade without breaking. You lean closer without crowding. A small drill of hard stone turns with steady rhythm, guided by a simple tool that turns effort into rotation. The hands pull and return in a measured cycle. They do not fight the bead. They negotiate with it until the bead agrees. The drill tip dips into water now and then, cooling and clearing grit. Fine slurry gathers and is wiped away with a cloth that has already accepted its fate. The bead is turned, inspected against lamplight, turned again. A tiny circle becomes a passage. Watching it, you feel your chest loosen, as if your own thoughts are being opened with the same quiet care. Nearby, finished beads are polished against a smooth stone. The sound is a soft whisper, like fabric shifting on a rooftop in night wind. A dull surface becomes sheen. A rough edge becomes something your fingers would trust. You realize how many steps hide inside an object you might otherwise dismiss as small. This city relies on repetition. One gentle pass after another until the world becomes smoother. Shell work occupies another corner. You recognize the curve of a conch from far beyond the river plain, carried here across distances your sleepy mind refuses to calculate. Thin slices are cut, then ground into bangles and inlays. The workers keep posture steady, backs supported against low walls, elbows close, movements economical. They treat shell as something alive enough to deserve respect, because a wrong angle cracks it and a rushed cut ruins it. So they slow down. A faint metallic clink draws you to another pool of lamplight. Copper sits in small pieces. Thin sheets, narrow rods, a tool blank waiting to become useful. Someone holds an object against a stone surface and taps, lightly, rhythmically, shaping without violence. The sound is gentle enough to soothe, but it carries seriousness. Metal remembers every blow. The maker checks the edge, turns the piece, taps again. Small corrections accumulate into form. You notice how these craft corners share the same discipline as the bathhouse. Tools rest where they can be found again. Water is kept nearby and used intelligently. Waste, stone dust, shell shavings, collects in tidy piles instead of spreading into everyone's breathing space. Even here, cleanliness is not separate from making. Unnecessary mess steals time, and time is the true currency of careful work. A finished string of beads lies out straight, tested for balance. Not identical, human hands are not machines, but consistent enough to feel intentional. The spacing is checked. The beads are rotated so their best faces align. It is quality control without drama. The same spirit you saw in the market's weights. Fairness begins long before the sale. You glance at the materials still waiting their turn. Unfinished stones bear faint scratches where a drill will enter next. Shell strips wait beside smoother bangles that are almost ready. Copper pieces sit in stages, each one closer to a tool or ornament. The progression is visible and reassuring. Nothing is mystical. It is a ladder built from small, patient steps. Behind these details, you sense a larger network. Shell arrives from the sea. Stone arrives from distant hills. Copper arrives along trade routes that fold landscapes into a single lane. Finished beads will travel again, exchanged for grain, cloth, or more raw material. The loop resembles the water cycle you have been following all night. Draw, use, guide, repeat. For a moment you imagine the hidden steps that happened earlier in the day. Carnelian warmed gently to deepen its color, then cooled so it does not crack. A drill point sharpened, a polishing stone chosen, a bowl of water carried and set within reach. The craft is never only the moment you see. It is preparation layered under preparation, like the city's covered drains doing their quiet work beneath your feet. Because you are still you, a modern mind wrapped in ancient night, a faint sarcastic thought tries to rise. If your world learned to make fewer things more carefully, entire industries would panic. The thought barely lands before it dissolves. The lamplight is too soft. The hands are too steady. Speed would shatter the shell and snap the drill. Here, hurry is not impressive. It is just expensive. You step back to give space. The makers continue, unbothered by your presence. Pull, turn, cool, polish, cut, grind, thin, smooth, tap, check, set aside. And without noticing when it happens, your own thoughts begin to imitate those hands. They slow. They separate into neat piles instead of scattering. They stop colliding. You turn away at last, the craft corner still glowing behind you like a warm ember, and you carry its lesson with you. The softest beauty is the kind that comes from steady effort repeated until it feels like peace. You turn from the lamplit craft corner and let the lane carry you into quieter geometry. The market's measured hum thins, and the city folds itself toward night. Residential streets run straighter, cleaner, calmer. Doorways like closed eyelids, walls holding the cool. The same covered drain line tracking along the edge as if it refuses to sleep before its job is done. A gentle slope underfoot reminds you that Mohenjo-daro plans for what bodies spill. Thresholds sit slightly raised. Corners are reinforced. Nothing is theatrical, and yet everything is considerate, like a place that expects life to be messy and chooses competence over complaint. A figure passes with a small jar hugged to the hip. No one beckons you. The person simply shifts aside, leaving a clear line toward a half-open entrance. You follow because tonight you have learned to trust the quiet path more than your restless instincts. Inside, a courtyard opens beneath the sky. Brick walls form a square of shelter, holding the day's last warmth like a mild blessing. The ground is swept clean, not obsessively, not performatively, just cared for. Moonlight lands in a pale rectangle, and the city's favorite shape seems to appear again, smaller and more intimate than the Great Bath, but familiar. Near one wall, a brick-lined well-mouth waits like a dark pupil. Cool air rises from it, crisp enough to make your skin tighten for a second, then soften. A rope lies coiled neatly beside a vessel, and the neatness tells you something important. Tomorrow has already been considered here. Hands draw water with steady economy. The pot descends, returns heavier, and the lift is done without strained theatrics. Water is poured into a wide jar set partly into the earth, using soil as a patient cooler. A cloth cover goes back over the mouth. The gesture is simple, but it carries a whole philosophy. Keep it clean, keep it cool, keep it ready. A shallow basin sits nearby. Someone rinses fingers, then a utensil, then a small cloth. Each action controlled so the basin does not overflow into chaos. Used water is not flung. It is guided. A narrow channel at the courtyard's edge leads away toward the covered drain line outside, and you can almost feel the city's hidden network accepting the household's leftovers without fuss. You watch the water's journey and recognize the loop you have been tracing all evening. Draw up with effort, use with intention, send away politely so it does not linger and sour. In the bathhouse it felt communal and grand. Here it feels personal, like a household's way of refusing to let grime turn into despair. In one corner, a modest bathing area sits partially screened. A raised brick ledge holds a jar and a ladle. The floor tilts toward a small drain point because even in private, the city refuses to pretend bodies do not make wetness and mess. Cloth hangs ready. A bowl waits for rinsing. Practicality, again, becomes its own quiet beauty. You imagine the ordinary sequence. A body returns from work with dust in hair, sweat on skin, the day clinging like a second shirt. Water is poured carefully, enough not wasteful. Ash or fine clay is rubbed in to lift grime. A rinse follows. Used water slides toward the channel. Clean cloth meets clean skin. The person steps back into the household lighter, and nobody needs a lecture about self-care because the bricks already know. Along the walls, storage jars sit with their mouths covered. A woven basket of grain rests slightly elevated to avoid damp and pests. Fuel is stacked where it stays dry. Tools are placed where they can be found again. The whole courtyard feels like an agreement made visible. Keep things protected, keep them usable, keep tomorrow from arriving as a crisis. Above you, the open sky is a dark bowl scattered with faint stars. Somewhere on a roof, cloth shifts in the breeze, and you remember the laundry laid out like calm flags. Somewhere beyond these walls, the great bath holds moonlight in a larger rectangle, sealed by bitumen seams that do not need applause. The city repeats shapes the way it repeats values. You feel your own habits changing under that repetition. Earlier, you scanned for problems, braced for surprises, tried to be ready for everything. Now you simply stand and take inventory. Cool well air, warm brick, the faint mineral scent of water, the clean skin that makes night feel gentler. Order here does not feel restrictive. It feels like permission to rest. A small modern reflex tries to rise, anxious, apologetic, convinced you might not belong. The courtyard answers it with silence and structure. The path is clear. The drain will take what it should. The jars are covered. The space is built to absorb normal human presence. You are not a disruption. You are simply passing through the system for a moment, and the system is calm enough to hold you. When you step back into the lane, the night seems even quieter, as if you have walked through the city's private heartbeat. You carry that domestic steadiness with you, the sense that cleanliness can be kindness, that systems can be gentle, that a well and a drain and a jar can keep a household's life from unraveling. Your feet turn naturally toward the bathhouse district again, and you do it with the feeling of someone who has seen the inside of Mohenjo-daro's calm, not just its public face. You find your way back to the bathhouse as if your feet have memorized the city's calm. The lanes are quieter now, the lamps fewer, the air cooler and cleaner against your skin. When the great bath returns to view, it looks the same at first. Brick geometry holding night, a rectangle of water reflecting moonlight in soft, broken pieces. But then you notice the edge. Not the brick edge, which remains steady, but the water line, the thin, honest line where liquid meets wall. It sits a little lower than it did earlier. Not dramatically, not in some cinematic gasp-worthy drop, but enough that your body registers it before your mind fully admits it. The steps near one side show a touch more brick than they should. The surface, too, seems a fraction less eager to meet the wall. The great bath is still calm, still beautiful, still holding the night like a dark mirror. Yet the mirror has been lowered by a careful hand. At first, you try to argue with yourself. Night light can trick you. Moon angles change. Ripples make lines look different. Your tired brain, always ready to invent excuses, offers them up like little peace offerings. But you have been watching systems all evening. Covered drains, settled silt, jars kept cool in earth. And you know what a system looks like when it shifts. You know when something that should be steady begins to slide. A small, thin thread of unease pulls through you. It is not panic. It is the same feeling you get when you hear a familiar sound in your home change slightly. An appliance humming off key. A faucet drip that becomes a trickle. It is the body recognizing that order depends on attention. You glance around, and you are not the only one who notices. The locals, those quiet hosts who guide without words, move differently now. Their pace is still slow, but their attention tightens. They drift toward the corners, toward the steps, toward the parts of the basin where seams matter. One pauses by the wall and places a hand just above the waterline, feeling dampness, checking temperature, reading the bricks the way you might read a pulse. Another traces the walkway with their eyes, tracking where water should be entering, where it should be leaving, where it might be escaping. No one rushes. No one performs alarm. Yet the bathhouse's atmosphere changes, the way a room changes when someone quietly closes a window. The calm remains, but it becomes purposeful. Your first instinct, your very modern instinct, is to become a spectator, to stand back, to wait for someone in charge to fix it, to scroll mentally through a list of possible explanations and feel helplessly clever about them. But Mohenjo-daro has been teaching you a different kind of belonging all night. If you use the water, you respect the water. If you share the space, you help keep it shared. You step closer to the edge, careful not to block anyone's path. Your eyes track the water line again. It is lower, yes, and the surface has a faint movement that suggests inflow is not matching what is leaving. Whether leaving through a planned outlet, through evaporation, or through a tiny weakness that has decided to become important at the worst possible time. You remember the bitumen seams glinting along the interior walls. You remember how the city does not ask water to behave without guidance. It seals, slopes, channels, covers. The Great Bath is not magic. It is maintenance in brick form. If the water is falling, something in that maintenance loop is out of balance. A few people begin to ease out of the pool, not because the water is suddenly unsafe, but because space is needed. Bodies move with the same considerate choreography you saw in the market. No collisions, no dramatic splashing, no making the problem louder than it is. Wet feet step onto the walkway. Cloths pat skin. Someone lifts a jar lid nearby. The quiet becomes thicker, like a blanket pulled up slightly higher. You feel the collective decision forming around you, unspoken but clear. Check first, correct gently, preserve the bath. A small group gathers near a freshwater basin and the area where water is usually brought in. Someone kneels and peeks into a channel opening, lifting a cover stone with care. The motion is familiar now, exactly like those access points you noticed along the street drains. The city builds systems with honesty. It leaves them reachable. It expects problems, and it expects people to solve them, not ignore them until the whole place collapses into a mess. You crouch nearby, far enough to give space, close enough to learn. The opening reveals darkness and damp brick, the faint smell of mineral water and earth. A thin trickle is present, but it looks weaker than before. The flow that should be feeding the bath is sleepy, as if it has been distracted by something upstream. Your mind tries to leap ahead. Silt buildup, blocked inlet, cracked seal, a settling shift in the brick. You do not know yet, and the bathhouse has no patience for guessing games. It wants observation. It wants calm hands. Another host walks the perimeter of the basin, eyes scanning for wet patches above the waterline, places where water might be seeping through and darkening brick. You follow the direction of their gaze and see what they see. A corner where the brick is slightly darker, not soaked, not dripping, just suspiciously pleased to be damp. Could be nothing. Could be the start of something. In a system built on small tolerances, could be nothing is rarely a comforting phrase. Your chest tightens for a moment, but the city steadies you. This is not a catastrophe. This is a small problem, exactly the kind of problem this place is designed to handle with patience. You think of bead makers cooling a drill tip in water, how they pause before heat becomes fracture. You think of laundry wrung slowly so cloth does not tear. You think of drains built with access points so a blockage can be cleared before it becomes a flood. Mohenjo-daro's entire personality is early intervention, but make it gentle. A few more cover stones are lifted along the nearby channels. A shallow tool appears, nothing elaborate, just something shaped to scrape and clear. You recognize the movement instantly because you have done something similar on your own skin. Loosen what clings, lift it away, keep the pathway clear. The same logic applies to a city. You shift closer to the channel line, scanning the direction of the water's intended path. If the trickle is weakening, the problem might be upstream. Silt settling where it should not, debris caught where flow narrows, or a seal that has softened with time and needs fresh bitumen. The host's attention keeps returning to corners and junctions, the places where systems either cooperate or fail. And without any formal invitation, you find yourself becoming useful in the only way you can. By noticing carefully, by staying out of the way, by carrying a small jar when hands are full, by holding a cover stone steady while someone checks a dark opening. It is humble work, barely worth calling work at all, yet it feels strangely comforting. It gives your mind a single, steady task. The water line remains lower than it should, but the bathhouse is not falling apart. It is simply asking to be cared for quietly, methodically, before the night goes too far. You look from the dim channel opening to the dark seam along the basin wall, then back toward the direction the water must come from, and you feel the next step forming like a slow breath. Trace the flow, find the cause, and help the city return to its gentle equilibrium. You move with the quiet cluster along the bathhouse edge, the way you move in a dark room when you do not want to stub your toe on the furniture of history. The moon gives enough light to outline bricks, but the real illumination comes from the low, steady lamps that people carry or set down near openings. Small pools of glow that turn damp stone into something readable. The first lesson returns immediately. Water is obedient until it isn't, and when it isn't, the cause is usually boring. Silt, debris, a seam that has aged, a slope that has settled by a finger's width. Not curses, not drama, just physics and time doing what they always do when no one is paying attention. You start with the simplest possibility, the inflow. A bath this large depends on consistent feeding, and the trickle you saw in the channel opening looked more tired than it should. So you follow the direction the channel suggests, moving away from the basin in small steps, careful not to block anyone who is still circling the pool's perimeter and scanning for dampness above the waterline. The covers come up one by one, each lifted with the same reverence you would use for a sleeping animal. The underside of the slab is cool and slightly slick, and when it is set aside, the channel beneath breathes out a damp, mineral smell, earthy, clean in a practical way, with a faint tang of tar where bitumen touches brick. You lean over, letting your eyes adjust to the dark corridor of masonry. There is water in it, yes, but it hesitates. A thin stream slides along the bottom, glossy in lamplight, then slows where the channel narrows near a junction. That is where everyone's attention gathers. The places where systems change direction, where flow has to make a decision. Those are the places where silt loves to sit down and pretend it lives there now. You trace a fingertip along the brick edge near the junction, above the waterline where the bricks should be dry. Your finger comes back slightly damp, slightly gritty. Not a flood, not a gush, but a hint of sediment. Fine, powdery, the kind that travels easily and settles wherever the water loses speed. It makes sense. The Indus plain is generous with dust, and dust has a way of following water like an uninvited friend who insists it was just passing by. A shallow tool appears again, simple, shaped for scraping and lifting. Someone uses it to pull gently at the bottom of the junction, and a thin cloud blooms in the water. Pale silt rising like a sleepy ghost, then drifting downstream. The stream immediately looks a fraction clearer, a fraction faster, as if it had been holding its breath and has finally decided to exhale. You follow the channel farther, cover stone by cover stone, each opening revealing the same story in different chapters. Damp brick, slow water, occasional pockets where sediment thickens. The further you go, the more you sense a pattern. It is not a single blockage like a dramatic cork. It is accumulation, fine material collecting in the low points, the way your own tension collected in your shoulders until oil and scraping persuaded it to leave. The thought makes you almost smile, because apparently your brain insists on metaphors even when everyone is quietly preventing an engineering inconvenience from becoming a communal disappointment. Still, the parallel is useful. You have already learned the technique. Loosen what clings, lift it away, keep the pathway clear. As you move, you also watch the walls. You check for darker patches that suggest seepage. The earlier suspicious corner at the basin remains in your mind. Brick that looked a little too pleased to be damp. You return to it between channel checks, stepping lightly along the walkway, eyes low. The corner is still darker than the surrounding brickwork, and now that you have seen more of the system, the dampness reads differently. It is not fresh splashing. It sits higher than splash would reach. It is subtle, but it has that steady, patient look of water that is not supposed to be there and is trying to be quiet about it. You touch the seam where two walls meet. The bitumen line is present, dark, tarry, the city's quiet promise. But in one small section it looks thinner, almost feathered at the edge. Time, heat, and repeated wet-dry cycles can do that. Bitumen can harden, crack, or peel if the underlying brick shifts by even a tiny amount. A seam does not need to fail dramatically to matter. A pin-width weakness multiplied by hours becomes a drop. Multiplied by a whole night, it becomes a lowered waterline. So now you have two suspects, neither glamorous, both perfectly believable. The inlet is being slowed by silt at junctions, and a corner seam is weeping. You follow the inlet route further upstream to where water is likely introduced and managed, near the areas you noticed earlier. Storage jars, settling points, places designed to let heavier grit drop out before water reaches the main basin. In lamplight, you find the low area where water collects briefly. It should look quietly clean, a controlled pause in the water's journey. Instead, it looks a little tired. A thin layer of sediment lines the bottom like flour on a baking board. Not disastrous, but enough to change flow. A few small bits of debris, organic fragments, tiny pebbles, sit where they should not. Over time, that layer thickens, and thickening turns pauses into slowdowns. The settling point is doing its job too well, and no one has cleared it recently enough. The city has been busy living. The bathhouse has been busy holding calm. Maintenance, which never shouts for attention, has been quietly waiting. You watch the water enter the settling point and then move onward, and you can see it. The slight hesitation, the gentle reluctance as the stream tries to carry on but is politely stopped by material that has decided to become part of the landscape. The slope still exists, but it has been softened by accumulation. The water is not blocked. It is simply slowed, like a person trying to walk through a room where chairs have gradually crept into the pathway. Back at the basin, the corner seam continues its faint dampness. Not a rupture, not a panic, just a leak that will keep leaking as long as the water presses outward and the bitumen remains thin in that one tired spot. Your mind settles into the quiet clarity of diagnosis. The problem is small enough to solve gently, but real enough to respect. Clear the silt from the settling point and the junctions, restore the flow. Refresh the seam with new bitumen. Give the corner back its seal. 2 unglamorous tasks, done steadily, and the great bath can return to being what it is meant to be. A shared pause that does not slowly drain away while everyone pretends not to notice. You glance across the water's dark surface, which still reflects the moon with patient beauty, even as it sits slightly lower than it should. The bathhouse feels less like a monument now and more like a living thing, strong, competent, but dependent on care. You breathe in the damp mineral air, and your tiredness does not spike into worry. It softens into readiness, because here is the oddly comforting truth. The city built access points for a reason. It left seams visible for a reason. It expected people, ordinary people, not heroes, to clear and reseal and restore. And tonight, in the hush of moonlit bricks, you are about to take part in that gentle restoration, one careful motion at a time. You do not need a trumpet call to begin. The bathhouse has already taught its rule in brick and slope. Fix what is small before it grows teeth. The people nearest the settling point move first, because the simplest repair is always to restore the flow. A cover stone is lifted and set aside on its edge, and lamplight falls into the shallow pause basin where silt has been quietly accumulating. Hands reach in with shallow scoops and flat tools, lifting sediment in slow pulls. The silt is fine, almost silky, and it clings the way fatigue clings when you insist you are fine. Comes up in damp clumps and is placed into a waiting basket lined with cloth. No one flings it back into the street. If you remove something messy, you remove it on purpose. You kneel with them, balancing carefully so you do not topple into ancient infrastructure and become an embarrassing footnote. Your scoop lifts a portion from the basin's bottom, cool, heavy, gritty, and you tip it into the basket. The water beneath clears by a shade, as if the settling point exhales. The work repeats until repetition becomes comfort. Scoop, lift, set aside. Someone runs a palm along the basin's slope, feeling for low pockets where sediment loves to sit. A little more is lifted from corners. When the bottom looks clean enough to do its job again, the cover stone is returned, lowered carefully so it sits flush and stable. Attention shifts to the channel junctions. One by one, slabs are lifted along the route, and the channel becomes a line of open mouths breathing damp air into the night. The stream below is present but hesitant, glossy in lamplight. Sediment has narrowed its confidence, especially where water slows and turns. Tools scrape gently, teased free rather than hacked. Each loosened pocket blooms into a pale cloud, and the stream carries it onward. At one stubborn junction, the silt is packed tighter by time. A narrow tool carves a slim groove through it, giving the water a path. Once the trickle has direction, it helps. The thin line undercuts the rest, and the compacted silt slumps and slides away in quiet pieces. You follow the route back toward the great bath, watching openings as they are cleared, then closed again. Cover stones return in order, seated properly so they do not become tomorrow's trip hazard. The hidden street of water is put back to sleep. At the basin, the surface near the inlet looks subtly different. Ripples more continuous, a faint liveliness that says fresh water is arriving without delay. The water line has not climbed yet, but the bath feels as though it has stopped losing its breath. Now the second task remains, the corner seam that has been quietly weeping. You move to the dampened brick, and the smell changes. More resinous, more tar dark. A small pot arrives, heavy and lidded. When it opens, warmed bitumen breathes out an earthy, sharp scent that is strangely reassuring, like a reminder that calm relies on practical stickiness. The bitumen has been softened carefully, warm enough to be workable but not scorched. Before anything new is pressed in, the old seam is prepared. The corner is wiped and dried as much as it can be. The thin, feathered edge of existing sealant is gently scraped to create a clean boundary, and the joint is cleared of grit so the new material can grip. You make yourself useful in the quiet ways, holding a lamp at the right angle, passing cloth when hands are slick, bracing the pot so it does not tip. The bathhouse does not need heroics. It needs hands that do not rush. Fresh bitumen is pressed into the seam in short, deliberate strokes, guided along the corner where wall meets floor. The tool compacts it, smooths it, persuades it into the brick's tiny gaps. Each pass darkens the line, thickens it, makes it more confident. The edge is feathered carefully so water will not find a lip to pry at later. The corner that looked too pleased to be damp begins to look properly restrained. Still dark from recent moisture, but no longer inviting it through. You wait through a few breaths while the material cools and sets. Feet move softly. No one hovers, but attention remains, the way you watch a candle after you shield it from wind, making sure it keeps its flame. A final check follows. A hand touches brick just above the waterline, feeling for fresh dampness. Fingers come back dry. The scent of warm tar fades into the wider smell of mineral water and cooled brick. Along the channels, the last stones settle into place, closing the access points until they are needed again. You return your gaze to the great bath. Ripples near the inlet continue, fine and steady. The waterline is still slightly low, but the balance has shifted. Inflow has regained strength. The seam has regained its seal. Now the bath only needs what it has asked for all night. A little time, a little patience, and the quiet cooperation of ordinary hands. And as you stand there with damp air on your skin and the city's systems humming beneath your feet, you realize the repair has already done its most important work. It has restored not only a pool, but the shared confidence that calm can be maintained, one careful motion at a time. You do not need to stare at the waterline to know it is changing. You feel it first in the bathhouse's atmosphere, the way bodies relax when a small threat of inconvenience has been quietly removed. Movement becomes less purposeful and more fluid. The hosts, who had tightened their attention like a drawn thread, loosen it again and return to their gentle orbiting. The lamps that hovered over open channels are carried away, their light no longer needed to read damp brick like a warning. Still, you look. The great bath holds moonlight in a soft sheet, and near the inlet the ripples continue. Fine, steady, reassuring. Over a few minutes, those ripples push a faint, almost imperceptible lift across the surface. The waterline creeps upward, not dramatically, but honestly, the way a tired body recovers. A little at a time with no announcement. The steps show a fraction less brick. The wall meets water again where it should. The city's rectangle is regaining its full, calm breath. The relief in the space is quiet, but it is everywhere. A person who had been waiting with arms folded now lets them drop. Someone who had paused near the walkway's edge eases back into the flow. A cloth that had been clutched too tightly is loosened and folded properly. Tiny gestures, barely noticeable, yet together they say, the system is back in balance. You feel it inside you as well. The small unease that appeared when you first noticed the lowering water has dissolved. Not because you ignored the problem, but because you faced it without panic. That, you realize, is the bathhouse's deeper gift. Clean skin is wonderful, but the cleaner thing is a calm mind that knows how to respond gently when something starts to slip. You step down into the pool again. The water welcomes you like a remembered comfort. It is cool, but your body has already learned its language. The pressure against your legs is steady and grounding. As you move farther in, the surface spreads your ripples outward and then smooths them, the way the city spreads effort across many hands and then returns to quiet. The repaired corner sits nearby, dark and clean-lined, holding its promise. The inflow continues, and the bath feels alive in the best way. Maintained, supported, not abandoned to chance. You lean your back against the wall for a moment, letting the brick support you beneath the waterline. It is cooler there, almost silky with moisture, and the contact anchors you. Above, the moon is higher now, and its light has shifted. Earlier, it made the water look like metal. Now it makes it look like ink, deep, soft, reflective. Around you, the bathhouse resumes its gentle choreography. Some people soak in stillness, eyes half-lidded. Others move slowly, rinsing arms, smoothing water over shoulders, letting the day dissolve. A few return to the walkway, patting skin dry, keeping the bricks safe for others. No one celebrates the repair. No one dramatizes it. That is part of what makes it feel so solid. Competence without performance. You let yourself float a little, not fully, just enough to feel a fraction of your weight leave you. The water supports you the way the city's systems support everyone. Quietly, consistently, without asking for gratitude. Your breathing slows, and the echo in the bathhouse catches it and rounds it, returning it to you as something softer. A small thought returns, playful and tired. Imagine if your own life had access points like these drains. Little stones you could lift to clear out accumulated stress before it became a blockage. Imagine if you treated your mind like a settling basin, clearing silt regularly instead of letting it build until everything slows down. The thought is not judgmental. It is oddly kind. Mohenjo-daro is not scolding you. It is simply showing you a model. Maintenance is love, and love can be practical. You watch the water surface again. It sits higher now, closer to where it was earlier, and the line against the brick looks confident. The bathhouse has regained its full presence, and the city's calm feels restored. Not fragile, not tentative, but quietly durable. The repair did not require drama. It required attention and patience, and those are the same qualities that make a person feel safe to themselves. Eventually, you rise and step toward the stairs, water sliding off you in thin sheets that catch moonlight and then fall away. You move slowly, not because you are weak, but because your body has learned the bathhouse's pace and does not want to betray it. On the walkway, you pat your arms and shoulders with cloth, keeping the shared space tidy. You notice how natural that feels now, how quickly a careful habit becomes part of you. You stand at the edge and look over the basin one last time in this moment of renewal. The repaired seam holds. The inflow whispers its steady message. The water reflects the moon and the brick walls in a calm, broken mirror. And you feel, in your bones, that you have not only visited an ancient city, you have participated in its living rhythm. Notice, respond, restore, return to quiet. The night is deeper now. The market lamps are dimmer in the distance. Rooftops hold drying cloth like sleeping wings. Somewhere in the lanes, covered drains carry away what they should carry away. And the great bath, full again in spirit and nearly full again in height, offers you the softest kind of reward. The sense that things can be fixed without losing peace. You leave the water slowly, as if you are stepping out of a thought you do not want to disturb. The last cool pressure slips off your skin and becomes air again. You pat your arms and shoulders with cloth, not chasing perfect dryness, just keeping the night breeze from biting. Behind you, the great bath holds its rectangle of dark water, reflecting the moon in a soft sheet that trembles, then settles back into stillness. For a second you watch the surface as if it might offer a signature, proof that calm holds. You take one last circuit along the walkway, letting your feet memorize the bricks. The steps descend in their calm line, corners reinforced, edges softened by countless sols. The repaired seam sits in its tar-dark stripe, quiet and confident, and you feel an almost ridiculous affection for it. Earlier, that corner tried to weep. Now it behaves. You glance at the waterline and see it where it belongs, hugging the wall with steady certainty, and your chest loosens as if your body had been holding on to the worry. The bathhouse does not ask you to say goodbye. It has no ceremony, no grand closing gesture. It simply continues, water drawn, water shared, water guided away. People move in small cycles, soak, rinse, pause, return, each person adding calm by behaving as if calm is normal. You catch yourself copying the etiquette without thinking. Drip less, step aside, let others pass, keep the shared path clear. It is the simplest form of community, and it works because nobody tries to turn it into a performance. You step through the opening into the lane, and the city receives you with the same practical kindness it offered at the start. Straight streets, cool shade pooled in brick corners, dust that rises softly and settles without complaint. Mohenjo-daro at night is restrained light. Small lamps glow behind doorways, and the moon paints the grid in pale angles. Along the edges, the covered drains look like ordinary lines of stone until you remember what they mean. A plan for what people spill, and a promise the street stays clean. You pass a courtyard entrance where the ground has been swept clean and a jar mouth is covered with cloth, weighted by a small stone. The gesture is so ordinary it almost disappears, yet it carries the whole city inside it. Protect what matters, keep it clean, keep it ready. A brick-lined well breathes cool air up into the night, and the dampness near its rim smells faintly of minerals and earth. Somewhere above, on a rooftop, cloth shifts in the breeze and settles again, and you remember the moonlit laundry drying above you. For a few streets you drift toward the market artery and find it nearly asleep. Goods are tucked away, baskets pulled closer to walls, measures and weights resting where they will be found again. The smell is softer now, grain, cooled smoke, a trace of oil, and it feels like the city has exhaled. A craft corner still holds a small ember of lamplight, but even there the hands have quieted, leaving shell and stone and copper to wait for morning. You think, with gentle sarcasm and no real bitterness, that your modern world could use more waiting, less hurry. The city's sounds are small. A distant footstep, a soft splash from someone rinsing a basin, the whisper of wind against brick. Your own footsteps become part of that quiet music, a slow rhythm matching your breath. Even the earlier problem feels like part of the teaching now, a gentle exam you passed by staying calm, clearing silt, and sealing what needed sealing instead of pretending nothing was wrong. You remember the fine grit that tried to settle into the junction like it owned the place, and you smile anyway. As you approach the edge of the mounds, you stop and look back once. The bathhouse is not fully visible from here, but you can sense it the way you sense a warm room you have just left. You picture the great bath holding moonlight, sealed and refilled, waiting for the next tired body. You picture the cover stones over the channels sitting flush again, discreet and ready. You picture the repaired seam cooling into firmness, never perfect forever, but perfect enough for the night, perfect enough for tomorrow. A brief tenderness rises in you, surprising and quiet. Not nostalgia too heavy, not triumph too loud, just gratitude for a place that understood, thousands of years ago, that humans need water and order and a shared pause. You feel it in your skin, still clean, still cool, and in your mind, finally willing to move at the city's pace. You let that feeling stand for a farewell, simple and respectful, the way the bathhouse taught you to leave space for others. Your steps slow as if the night itself is asking you to soften. The last traces of mineral scent fade, replaced by reed air and earth. You breathe in once, deep and easy, and on the exhale you let Mohenjo-daro go, the way you let water slip through your fingers without trying to keep it. The city remains, steady in its own time, while you drift onward into the dark with a quieter heart. The night keeps walking with you, but it walks more slowly now. The air feels cooler at the back of your neck, and every breath comes in smoother, as if the river has quietly edited out the sharp edges of your day. You let your shoulders drop, one small centimeter at a time, the way the bathhouse taught the water to settle when the silt was lifted and the channels were opened again. In your mind, the great bath becomes a calm, dark mirror you can carry without strain. You do not need to hold every detail, brick counts, angles, measurements, the exact weight of a cover stone. You only need the feeling of steady maintenance, the simple proof that a small problem can be met gently, and that gentleness can still be effective. You picture the moon resting on the water, then breaking into ripples, then returning to stillness, and you let your thoughts copy that rhythm. If your worries try to line up like anxious jars in a courtyard, you do not fight them. You just place a quiet cloth over them, add a small stone of patience, and let them stay contained for the night. If your mind tries to rush, you remind it that even the market sleeps, and nothing important is lost by waiting until morning. Your eyelids grow heavier, not like a crash, but like a soft curtain lowering. Your breathing lengthens. Your jaw unclenches. Somewhere, far behind you, Mohenjo-daro continues to care for itself, and you are allowed to do the same. You sink into that permission, warm and safe, and you drift. Let the last image fade. Brick, water, moonlight, then darkness. Feel the bed under you, the pillow, the quiet room. Nothing else is required. Sleep arrives and you welcome it now. End of story. Sweet dreams.